My viewer was a hospice nurse for a man of the cloth. She thought that his cries for forgiveness were just part of the dying process until the news came on and the visitors started walking through the front door. She was assigned to care for a retired priest. At first, he was pleasant, soft spoken, and polite, but something about the way he spoke about his death felt off. He would say things like, "In death, we pay for our sins," but she just brushed it off until one morning the news came on and a story about priests being accused of abusing those they were meant to protect was the main topic. The man nearly choked on his breakfast and his hands shook as he demanded she change the channel. The fear in his reaction stayed with her. As his condition worsened and he became confined to his rooms, she realized that those weren't words, they were a warning. At night, strange things began to happen. She heard whispering in the hallways, children laughing when no one else was there, and afterwards, the priest would cry out in pain, repeating, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I've done." She tried to comfort him. She told him that forgiveness was possible, and he would look at her and whisper, "Not for me." His words faded into moans, and dark figures began to scatter through the room whenever she entered. Whispers followed her in and out, and then one night, when she arrived for what she thought would be a normal shift, and her coworker left, the visitors arrived. Young men, one by one, they walked straight through the door without even opening it, and they said nothing and went right into his room and surrounded his bed. The whispers returned, but this time she said you could understand them, and they were all whispering, "We kept your secrets, and now we return." The words grew louder, closer, angrier, until silence fell. A dark silhouette of a hand crept over the top of the bed, and then the priest took his final breath. She never worked hospice again. What sins do you think the priest committed? And if you're seeing this before 2026, Happy New Year. If you enjoyed this unsettling tale, make sure you are following me and share it with your horror-loving healthcare working friend. And make sure, if you want to support my content a little bit more, you go to my link in my bio and buy me a coffee. Have your best spooky
Not
year.
my ghost story,
Bye.
but this is terrifying.
I work in hospice. Spirits are real. I'm sorry. Ghosts are real. I'm going to be the first one to tell you. One time I'm in this room on my own and I'm cleaning this body to be bagged. I'm the only one in there, right? I'm by the body. The bathroom call light starts going off, like ringing. And I'm like, so I walk in there, press a little button, turn it off. Walk back out there, starts going off again. I walk back in there, turn it off. I walk back out to the body and the call light, it's like next to her, is buzzing, like it's making a buzzing noise. They don't do that. They don't make that noise. I was like, bitch, the fuck? The time this girl that I work with was holding this patient's hand as they passed. And then when they like close their eyes, passed, took their last breath, she looks up at the light starts flickering. Like immediately after the patient passed, light starts flickering. It don't do that. It don't work like that. Something was there. Not hospice, but I had this confused patient once, and he did not remember what he said 3 seconds ago. Like, he was not talking about the same stuff all day. He was super confused, right? 3 separate times throughout the day, he looks at me and asks me about the lady with long black hair standing behind me and not smiling. What the fuck do you mean, the lady with long black hair standing behind me and not smiling?
When I worked in a nursing home, I always used to ask the hospice nurses, what's the creepiest thing or way that you've seen somebody die? Or what was like the creepiest last words? And I will never forget one nurse who told me she had this patient who was on hospice but didn't have any family to come visit him, and they would call the family and they'd be like, "I'm not interested." Apparently this was not a loved man. Maybe self-inflicted, who knows? But she said that right before he died, she saw black hands reach over the back of the headboard of the bed he was in. He was at home. And then the guy sat up, let out a blood-curdling scream, laid back down, and died. The stories that hospice nurses have, oh my God.
So when my mom told me this story, it gave me goosebumps. So my mom is a hospice nurse, and one night a few years ago she was on call, and she gets a call from one of the hospitals in town that says, hey, we got a patient, they just got the bad news from the doctor, and they want to be on hospice. My mom did her job. Okay, let them know I'll be there shortly. Probably take me about 10 minutes. So at the hospital was this woman, we'll call her Jane. She had just gotten told by the doctor, the bad news that she had terminal cancer, and she didn't have a whole lot longer to live. So while her family was there, they elected to go on hospice for the remaining time that she had left. So after they had made the decision as a family, her kids, everybody, they left. So Jane was kind of sitting there taking it all in while she was waiting for the hospice nurse. In this moment, a woman walks in her room, and Jane's kind of looking up like, who the hell are you? And this woman introduces herself and says, hi, my name's Betty. I'm your neighbor. I've been your neighbor for the last couple days here in the hospital. I'm just in the room down the hall. And I heard the bad news. So I just wanted to come in and say, is there anything I can do for you to let you know that it's going to be okay? And Jane was like, what do you mean you heard how did you hear the bad news? And she was kind of taken aback by this. And she's talking to me, and she goes, no, I'm okay. I think I just need some time. The hospice nurse is coming. I'm going to just take some time to myself. So this woman comes and goes, okay, okay, sweetie, we're in the Midwest. Okay, sweetie, if you need anything, let me know. And so instead of turning around and leaving the room, Betty turns and walks into the bathroom of Jane's room and shuts the door. And Jane was just kind of shocked, like, what is happening here? And literally, probably 60 seconds after that happened, my mom got there. She came and she knocked on the door, hi, I'm the hospice nurse. Do you have a minute to talk? And Jane was kind of like, yeah, I guess. So my mom, she's been a nurse for a really long time. And so she sees like this hesitation on Jane's face, and she can hear it in her voice. And she's like, is there something on your mind? Do you want to say something? And Jane was kind of like, so my neighbor, Betty, just came in and, was really sweet, really a nice lady, but she just went into the bathroom and she's still in there. My mom was like, oh, okay. How long has she been in there? And Jane was like a minute or so, but I can't, I don't hear anything. I don't hear, what's going on. So my mom is trying to be very polite. Obviously, this is a situation where Betty doesn't need to be there. And, my mom's been in healthcare for a long time. She thought maybe Betty might have a little dementia or something. So she walks over to the bathroom door and she knocks, and there's no answer. And she knocks again and she says, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm with hospice. I'm going to open the door. So then she goes to open the door and there's nobody in there. So then, my mom says to Jane, gosh, there's nobody in here. And Jane's like, kind of wigged out. Obviously, she's like, I had a conversation with her. Like, I'm not sleeping. I'm not groggy. She was in there. And so, my mom was like, okay, well, let's, you just had a traumatic, thing happen. It's a lot going on. Let's kind of get going. We'll talk through this, and maybe I'll go check on Betty, and maybe she slipped out at some point when you didn't see her. So they finished the paperwork, because of course it's healthcare, there's paperwork for everything. So they finished the paperwork. My mom says, they finished chatting, and my mom says, okay, well, I'll go check on Betty and we'll be at the end. And Jane's like, okay, thank you for coming. So my mom leaves and walks over to the room that Betty said she was from, and she looks in and there's nobody in there. So then she walks down to the nurse's station to report off, I guess, what she had done, and kind of keep in communication with the nurses. And as she's reporting to the nurses, she tells them, hey, Jane said Betty kind of came in her room right before I got there, and I can't find her in her room now, so I just want to make sure that, if she has dementia or something, she's not lost somewhere, so if somebody could just make sure she's okay. And I'll never forget my mom's face when she told me this part. She said the nurse looks at her and goes, what? So my mom goes, Betty, I just want to make sure she's okay. She was in, and recants the story. And the nurse looks at her and goes, Betty died this morning, like 12 hours ago. Betty's not there. Betty was not in her room. And of course, my mom was shooketh by this. My mom is not a storyteller. She's not she's a spiritual person, but, she's not big into the paranormal. So this really took her back. She was pretty freaked out by this, but yeah, when she told me the story, like I said, I know her. She doesn't make up stories. She doesn't make this stuff up. So when she was telling me this, like, I got goosebumps. I'm like, that is creepy.
Working with healthcare vets will teach you things that they will tell you don't even exist in the textbook. When I was a CENA, I worked with a woman named Miss Nita. That night changed me. We had a patient pass, and as we was cleaning up his body, his chest suddenly snapped upward and sucked in air like he had been drowning. And I screamed. Miss Nita, she didn't even flinch. She just laughed and said, "That's nothing. The dead still got reflexes." And then she looked at me with a real serious face and then said, "What you gotta worry about is when they grab you back." She told me about a hospice patient that she had took care of some years ago. She said the woman wasn't dying peacefully. Like, she was panicking. She was scratching at the sheets. She was reaching into empty air. She kept crying that someone was at the foot of her bed for almost a week, even though she never had any visitors and there was no one there. When Miss Nita seen this, she leaned over to take her vitals and the woman's hand shot out and locked around her wrist. Miss Nita said it didn't feel like a hand though. It felt like a hook. And in one blink of an eye, the room around her disappeared, and she was pulled into somewhere behind the world with no walls or no ceiling, just awareness. Time didn't move, it pressed, and standing around that bed where that woman was laying were girls, not ghosts. These were witnesses, girls the woman had hurt while they were alive. Miss Nita said they weren't angry, and that's what was scaring the woman. They were calm. They had been patiently waiting for a long time. And then she understood that this wasn't hell, she was saying. This was collection. As she felt herself slipping further, like if she didn't come back, she wouldn't have came back, if you know what I mean. And that's when she must have blacked out, because she said she found herself on the floor. And then once her wrist was away from the patient's hand, the patient let out one final gasp. Miss Nita said she watched something peel away from the body and get dragged straight through the floor. The body never moved, but the room felt emptier. And when she went home and told her nanny about it, the old woman said a prayer and she told her, "That woman showed you what waits for people who don't answer for what they done." And then she grabbed the same wrist that the woman did and said, "Be careful who you let touch you at the end. Some souls don't want to go alone." And ever since she told me that, I keep my hands to myself when they start reaching, because I don't know what is reaching back. Comment, don't grab me if this story make your skin crawl. Make sure you're following me for more